2 ingredients. That's all it took. Picture a low-ceilinged kitchen on the outskirts of a Judean village, the late afternoon sun pushing amber light through a single narrow window, a clay bowl set on a worn wooden table, and a woman pressing the flat of a bronze knife against a pale clove until it splits with that sharp green crack and releases its unmistakable perfume. The smell of crushed garlic rises, vegetal and biting, a scent so ancient the very walls of the kitchen remember it. Beside the bowl sits a small sealed jar of honey, thick and slow-moving, the color of molten amber and late-harvest wheat combined. She tilts the jar. The honey falls in a single unbroken ribbon, coating the crushed garlic, filling every gap, sealing the paste under a glossy layer that will preserve it for months. 2 ingredients combined in a small clay bowl, in the kitchen of a household in ancient Judea. 2 ingredients that physicians in Egypt, Mesopotamia, Greece, and Rome all independently recorded as the most reliable preparation in their medical kits for 2,000 years. 2 ingredients that modern microbiology laboratories are now studying with something close to astonishment. Not because the remedy was forgotten, but because when researchers actually tested it against modern antibiotic-resistant bacterial strains, the results came back in a range that surprised them. This combination does not cure infection. Let me be clear about that. It is not a replacement for modern medicine, but historically it was used to support the body through exactly the kinds of bacterial challenges that, without antibiotics, used to kill. And the 2 ingredients are almost certainly sitting in your kitchen right now. Raw honey and raw garlic. That is the entire formula. The history is older than scripture itself. Egyptian medical papyri from around 1550 BCE, specifically the Ebers Papyrus, prescribe honey and garlic for wound care, digestive complaints, and what we would today call general infections. The Ebers Papyrus is not a small document. It runs to more than 100 pages of careful hieratic script, and honey appears in roughly 500 of its remedies, garlic in dozens more. The scribes who compiled it were drawing on an oral and written tradition that stretched back through the pyramid builders, through the first dynasty, into prehistory. Hippocrates, the Greek physician practicing around 400 BCE, wrote about the same combination, describing honey and vinegar protocols for wound irrigation and recommending garlic for pulmonary complaints and general weakness. Dioscorides, the 1st century Greek surgeon who traveled with the Roman legions, catalogued both honey and garlic as essential components of the physician's field kit in his De Materia Medica, a text that would remain the standard pharmacological reference in Europe and the Islamic world for more than 1,500 years. The Talmud contains multiple references to garlic and honey, both separately and together, as daily supports for health. Proverbs chapter 24 verse 13 tells the reader, "Eat thou honey, because it is good." 1 Samuel chapter 14 tells the story of Jonathan eating honey from a honeycomb on the battlefield and having his eyes enlightened, which ancient commentary connects to revived strength and clarity of mind after exhaustion. Numbers chapter 11 records the Israelites longing for the garlic they had eaten in Egypt, a craving so specific it entered the canon. Both foods are scriptural. Both foods were, in the ancient world, considered medicinal. Together they formed a preparation so common it did not even need a name. Later, in medieval Europe, the monastic infirmaries of the Benedictines kept crocks of honey-preserved garlic in their cellars, tended by monks who had inherited Dioscorides through Latin translation, and who saw no contradiction between prayer and pharmacology. Let me explain what modern research has actually documented. Raw, unprocessed honey contains 3 separate antimicrobial mechanisms, and understanding all 3 is what makes the science click into place. The first mechanism is osmotic pressure. Honey is a supersaturated sugar solution with a water activity so low that most bacteria cannot replicate inside it. Any microbe that lands in honey is effectively desiccated, its cellular water pulled outward by the surrounding sugar gradient. This is the same principle that preserves jam and cured meat, but honey does it with an intensity few foods can match. The second mechanism is the peroxide pathway. An enzyme called glucose oxidase, added by the bees themselves, slowly converts glucose into gluconic acid and hydrogen peroxide when the honey is diluted by moisture from a wound or from the body's own tissues. This produces a steady, low-level release of hydrogen peroxide that research suggests is far gentler on tissue than the concentrated peroxide in a pharmacy bottle, yet sustained over hours. The third mechanism is the non-peroxide antimicrobial fraction, a collection of compounds that includes methyl glyoxal, bee-derived defensin-1, an antimicrobial peptide the bees themselves secrete into the nectar, and a suite of flavonoids such as pinosembrin, chrysin, and galangin. Methyl glyoxal is the compound that made Manuka honey famous, though research has since identified measurable quantities in honeys from other regions, including Middle Eastern wildflower, thyme, and citrus honeys that would have been common in 1st century Judea. A 2012 study in the Journal of the Royal Society of Medicine documented honey's clinical use in wound care settings. A 2018 review in Frontiers in Microbiology summarized honey's antimicrobial activity against a remarkable range of bacterial species. A 2011 paper in the Asian Pacific Journal of Tropical Biomedicine specifically evaluated raw honey against multiple clinical bacterial isolates and reported broad inhibitory activity associated with the honey's combined mechanisms. Raw honey, research suggests, may support the body's defense against microbial challenges in ways that isolated pharmaceuticals cannot fully replicate because it is not a single molecule. It is a layered system. Garlic brings its own arsenal, and the chemistry is just as layered. When a raw garlic clove is crushed or chopped, the enzyme allinase converts the precursor alliin into allicin within seconds. Allicin has been the subject of intensive antimicrobial research for at least 3 decades. Studies have documented its activity against common gram-positive and gram-negative bacteria, certain fungi, and even specific parasites. A landmark 1999 study in the journal Microbes and Infection reported that allicin demonstrated measurable activity against bacterial strains, including several that were, at the time, considered challenging in the antibiotic landscape. A 2001 paper in the Journal of Applied Microbiology examined allicin's effect on a range of bacterial species and found the compound disrupted bacterial enzyme systems at concentrations well within what a kitchen preparation can deliver. A 2011 review in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology, tracing the traditional medicinal uses of garlic across Middle Eastern and Mediterranean cultures, documented the persistent historical association between fresh crushed garlic and support during infectious illness, from Assyrian tablets through Andalusian herbals. More recent research, including a 2021 review in the journal Nutrients, has continued to document allicin's broad-spectrum antimicrobial behavior. But allicin is only the first wave. It is unstable by design. It peaks within 10 minutes of crushing and degrades over hours, breaking down into a second generation of compounds, including diallyl disulfide, diallyl trisulfide, and ajoine, each with its own documented antimicrobial and antifungal activity. Ajoine, in particular, has drawn research attention for its activity against certain fungal species and biofilm-forming bacteria. And when garlic is then submerged in honey and allowed to age, a third category of compounds emerges, most notably S-allylcysteine, a water-soluble, stable sulfur compound associated in clinical research with cardiovascular and immune-supportive properties. The ancients didn't know any of these compound names. They knew that fresh crushed garlic worked, that dried garlic or old cloves did not, and that garlic stored under honey somehow became something slightly different and often better tolerated. Observation substituted for molecular understanding, and the observation was accurate. Now the question nobody outside of microbiology asks: what happens when you combine them? This is where it gets remarkable. A 2005 study published in the journal Archives of Medical Research investigated the combined antimicrobial effect of honey and garlic and found that the two substances acted synergistically, meaning the combined effect was greater than the sum of each acting alone. The allicin from garlic provides rapid but short-lived antimicrobial pressure, a first-hour burst that targets exposed bacterial enzyme systems before it degrades. The honey provides sustained, slower-acting pressure through its osmotic effect, its peroxide release, and its non-peroxide fraction, all of which continue working for hours and days after the allicin is gone. Together they appear to cover a broader temporal and biochemical range than either alone. Think of it as two overlapping shields with different shapes. The garlic covers the first window, fast and sharp. The honey covers the long window, slow and layered. Where one fades, the other is still active. This is exactly what the ancients observed without any of the vocabulary. They observed that the combination worked, they stored it, they used it. And when modern science finally looked, the science confirmed what the kitchens had known for 3 millennia. Here is how the preparation was made in ancient Judean households. Take 1 medium head of fresh garlic. Peel the cloves, crush them, either with the flat of a knife or with a mortar, until they form a rough paste. Allow the paste to sit exposed to air for 10 minutes. This is the window during which allinase converts alliin into allicin, and skipping it significantly reduces the potency of the finished preparation. Then spoon the crushed garlic into a clean glass jar and cover it completely with raw, unfiltered, unheated honey. Make sure every piece of garlic is submerged. Any clove poking above the surface risks spoilage because honey's protection requires full contact. The honey should fill the jar to the top, leaving only a small air gap. Seal loosely with a lid because the mixture will release gas as it ages. Let it sit at room temperature for at least 2 weeks, ideally a month, occasionally tipping the jar to redistribute the honey and ensure the cloves remain submerged. During this time, the garlic slowly releases its sulfur compounds into the honey. The honey slowly draws moisture from the garlic. And what emerges is a thin, amber, strong-smelling preparation that keeps almost indefinitely at room temperature. When needed, 1 teaspoon was the traditional serving, taken on the tongue slowly, allowed to coat the throat, not chased with water immediately. The smell was strong, the taste was sharp, and the ancient observers noted, across cultures, that it was associated with shorter duration of minor respiratory complaints, with support during recovery from digestive upset, and with what they perceived as the body's better response to low-grade infectious challenges. There is important nuance about this preparation that modern home preparers need to understand. Raw honey is safe for adults but should not be given to infants under 1 year of age because of the possible presence of Clostridium botulinum spores that an adult gut handles easily, but an infant gut cannot. This is a firm rule and applies to the honey garlic preparation as well. Any infection that is serious, that is escalating, or that involves high fever, spreading redness, difficulty breathing, or any symptom of systemic illness requires medical attention. This preparation was historically used for minor complaints and preventively. It was not, and is not, a replacement for modern medical care. The ancients lost people to infection all the time. The food was a support. It was not a miracle. Let me be clear about that. The sourcing of your ingredients matters more than almost anything else. And this is where most modern attempts at the preparation fail before they begin. Supermarket honey, particularly the filtered, heat-processed kind sold in plastic bears, has been stripped of many of the active components that make honey medicinal in the first place. The commercial processing chain typically heats honey above 160 degrees Fahrenheit to make it pour cleanly, then passes it through fine filters that remove the pollen, the wax particles, and most of the enzyme activity. The glucose oxidase that would have produced the slow-release peroxide is denatured. The defensin 1 peptide is degraded. The flavonoids are reduced. What remains is sweetener, not medicine. What you need instead is raw, unfiltered honey from a local beekeeper or a reputable producer who specifies minimal processing and low-temperature handling. Look for honey that is slightly cloudy, sometimes crystallized, often with a faint haze of pollen visible when held to the light. The label should say raw and unfiltered, ideally with a floral source named wildflower, clover, orange blossom, thyme, buckwheat. It should have a rich, complex aroma rather than a generic sweet smell, and the taste should carry a slight edge, sometimes floral, sometimes almost resinous. The garlic is equally specific. Firm heads, tight, unbroken, papery skins, no green sprouts emerging from the top, no soft or hollow-feeling cloves. Pre-peeled garlic sold in plastic tubs is almost useless because the cloves have been exposed to air and moisture long enough that the alliin has already partially converted and degraded. Imported, irradiated garlic that sits on supermarket shelves for months has reduced enzyme activity. Dried garlic powder is worse still. What you want is fresh, untreated garlic, ideally from a farmer's market or a trusted grocer with quick turnover, with cloves that feel heavy for their size and snap cleanly when pressed. Fresh cloves, crushed fresh, are non-negotiable. Now, a word on the aging process, because this is where the preparation becomes genuinely fascinating. Some traditions allow the honey garlic preparation to ferment for months, even a full year before first use. During extended aging, the color deepens from pale gold to deep amber to almost mahogany. The texture thins as the honey draws water from the cloves, and the garlic itself becomes soft, translucent, and remarkably mellow in flavor, losing most of its raw pungency. A slow, low-activity fermentation takes place. The sugars in the honey feed a quiet biochemical process. The sulfur compounds rearrange, and new molecules appear. S-allylcysteine accumulates during this aging window, which is one of the reasons aged garlic extracts, sold as standalone supplements, often specify their S-allylcysteine content. A 2016 paper in the Journal of Nutrition reported that aged garlic extracts were associated with measurable shifts in cardiovascular markers across several clinical trials. The preparation continues to evolve over months. Whether your jar is 2 weeks old or 6 months old, both will work, but many traditional households kept a jar always aging in the back of a cool cupboard, drawing from an older jar while a newer one matured. Never running out, never starting from zero, the use pattern historically was both preventive and responsive. Healthy adults in Judean and later Mediterranean households would take a small spoonful perhaps once or twice a week as general support through the colder months, folding it into the daily rhythm of the household the way a modern person might keep a jar of olive oil or a bottle of vinegar on the counter. At the first sign of the throat feeling scratchy, the energy dipping, the head feeling heavy, the dose would increase to once or twice a day, often stirred into warm water with a squeeze of lemon or dissolved slowly on the tongue before bed. Children who could tolerate the taste were given smaller portions diluted with warm water and a little extra honey. The ancients understood, without ever labeling it in the modern sense, the concept of supporting the body's defenses before a situation escalated, of leaning on familiar foods as a first line rather than waiting for crisis. Modern research on preventive use of antimicrobial foods is still emerging, but the pattern is consistent. Regular, moderate intake of antimicrobial-rich foods is associated with favorable immune markers over time, and a growing body of peer-reviewed work continues to examine how traditional food-based preparations may support resilience alongside, never in place of, modern clinical care. There is a larger principle in Scripture that speaks to exactly this kind of preparation. Genesis chapter 1 verse 29 records the moment when God gives to humanity every herb bearing seed and every tree in which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed. Food was not just food, it was designed, it was given with purpose. Proverbs chapter 16 verse 24 says, "Pleasant words are as an honeycomb, sweet to the soul and health to the bones." Health to the bones. That is not metaphor only. That is a population that had observed that honey, taken regularly, seemed to correlate with stronger recovery and better overall resilience. The observation was ancient. The explanation is modern. The food is unchanged. So try this. Make one small jar. Follow the proportions carefully. Use raw, unfiltered honey from a source you trust. Use fresh garlic from a head that still feels firm and heavy in your hand. Crush the cloves. Wait the 10 minutes. Submerge them fully Seal the jar loosely and set it in the back of a cool cupboard. Let it sit. Use a teaspoon at the first suggestion of a cold or a tickle in the throat. Use it as a spoonful mixed into warm water with a squeeze of lemon on a tired winter evening. Keep it in the cupboard, unrefrigerated, for whenever it is needed. And the next time you walk past that jar on the way to reach for a more convenient option, pause for just a moment. Consider that the preparation sitting quietly in your cabinet has supported human health for 3 millennia, through the kitchens of Judea, the infirmaries of Benedictine monasteries, the field kits of Roman surgeons, and the laboratories of modern microbiologists who are only now catching up to what the scribes of the Ebers Papyrus wrote down in 1550 BCE. Share this recipe with someone who starts every winter with a cycle of colds that never quite seems to end, with a friend who values what is old and proven, with a family member who has always suspected that the best things are often the simplest. 2 ingredients, 1 small jar, 1,000 years before pharmacies, and still going.